Hey, Steve. Could you mind repeating what you just said? I think I was not recording.
Oh, I was just wondering if you listened to the Woodland War Machine podcast today. I know you're a big Root guy, as am I, and they put out their episodes on Thursdays now that season 2 started. Just got to shout out other larger podcasts than us because they clearly need the views and attention more than us. But yeah, I was wondering if you had caught that.
I wonder how big their podcast actually is. I did not listen to the one today, actually. I had an interview today, and mom and dad are having a big event on Sunday, something or other, and so we spent a lot of the time after my interview cleaning the house and doing stuff like that because we all have a busy weekend coming up. So part of the joys of, still living at home, but it was nice, and I will listen to the podcast sooner than later. For those of you who don't know, Root is a board game that's amazing. It's about cute little animals slaughtering each other.
And yes, it's a very violent game despite the cutesy aesthetic.
Yes.
Many tears have been shed over this Woodland War game.
Yes.
But that is, besides the point of what we're going to talk about today, Justin.
Yeah, we're not talking anything about that.
That's true.
Except
but
for now.
We are planning to talk about some board games in the future. We haven't quite got around to, diving, fully into one of our favorite games in a full episode yet, but it's on the horizon. We got lots of stuff in the pipeline, if not officially scheduled. So we'll continue flying by the seat of our pants until it doesn't work out for us. But Today, Justin, we are talking about Marvel's Eternals, the newest entry to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the first movie since Shang-Chi, which I guess was the last entry to the MCU as well, though What If was kind of in between that as well. But Eternals, very unique entry into the MCU, I would say, before we even get into the nitty-gritty of the good and the bad and the in-between of this movie, because it's getting mixed reviews. I don't know if you've seen that online, but prior to release, it was getting absolutely nuked on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, critics were destroying this movie. It was the worst rated MCU movie by a wide margin, which blew my mind because like Dark World and Black Widow exist. So I went into this movie not even paying attention to those reviews, and I have to say they were wrong. This is definitely not the worst MCU movie. But I'm also seeing a lot of people online and in other reviews glowing about this movie and saying it's one of their favorite entries, and it's like a top 3 MCU film. And, it's fine if it's one of their favorites. That's, subjective. I'm not going to hold that against other people for what they choose to enjoy. But personally, I did not find this anywhere near like the top 3 of my favorites. For me, after 2 viewings, it's pretty firmly middle of the road, which is a completely fine movie. I mean, Marvel's middle of the road is still miles better than, a lot of the stuff DC has put out in recent years, and just, again, miles ahead of lots of other superhero movies that have come out, in recent years. So, middle of the road for Marvel, while not exceeding or raising expectations super high, certainly not a disappointment, I would say, either. But again, before we go into all the details here, I just wanted to get your preliminary thoughts.
So I tried my best to stay away from all of the pre-release chatter about this movie, right? I didn't watch any of the trailers. I tried not to look at any reviews. I tried not to listen to just the general atmosphere, hubbub around the movie. But of course, it's inevitable that some stuff you're going to see. And I have not really cared what critics have thought about almost any movie that I've seen, because, I mean, the critics loved, like, The Last Jedi, right? And that was a movie that I did not like at all. And there are plenty of examples. Like, what movies win the Oscars, right? There are some really high-quality movies that I enjoy, and they're definitely high-quality, technically high-quality movies that win the big awards and stuff. But, I mean, when I seriously look at the list of winners, half the time I've never even heard of the movie, or it's one that's about some bland thing that, some whatever. There was that one a few years back about, like, the fish and the person romance, whatever. Just like
The Shape of
stuff
Water?
The Shape of Water, right?
Yeah.
The ones that I would just have never any interest in. And so I don't think that my tastes line up always with the critics. And so, even though I heard that it was really negatively reviewed by critics, actually, not just by audience, um, I didn't really care going into the movie. I'm like, whatever. There's plenty of stuff that they hate that I love. Like, I love the Transformers movies, even though they're really big
Oh,
jokes.
stop it!
And those
I
got
can't believe you just said
those got
that.
horrible views.
I can't believe you just said
Well,
you
let's
love
say,
Transformers.
let me see. I liked a couple of the first ones, and then I stopped watching. But
Okay.
I enjoyed the viewing experience. So regardless, um, I wasn't swayed by that at all going into the movie. Like you said, calling it the worst movie in the MCU is a joke. There's no chance it's the worst movie in the MCU. Calling it top 5 is also. I can understand why some people would think that if you came with a certain perspective into this movie. However, I would say it's nowhere near the top 5. I walked out of this movie and I was like, okay, I'm glad I saw it. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. It was fine. And like it, that was totally fine as a viewing experience. There were plenty of really fun moments, and I'm excited to see the implications that it has on the larger MCU. It was plenty serviceable. It was right around the middle for me. Like, it did what I asked of it, and I'm not going to sing its crazy high praises, but I'm also not going to say it's a terrible movie because that's just not true at all. So people who are actually absolutely trashing this movie, I don't know what movie they saw, but people that are saying it's one of the best ever, I'm also like, it just didn't get there for me. And that's okay because there's like 25, 26 movies out at this point. Not everyone's going to be Infinity War. That's okay. So it was plenty serviceable movie for me. Glad I saw it. I'm not dying to see it again, at least not to pay to see it again in theaters. So that was kind of my first thoughts. It was plenty fine.
Yeah. I initially on the first watch, because I have seen this twice. The first watch, I was pretty low on it, to be honest. I wouldn't have put it at the very bottom, but was considering putting it fairly low on my list. I have seen it a second time since, and it went up a significant amount for me. There was just a lot of stuff that not that I necessarily didn't catch or completely missed on the first time, but there was just a lot of stuff that clicked and made more sense with what they were trying to do, and I thought fit better the second time, and I appreciated it more for what it actually was instead of any preconceptions of what I wanted it to be. Similar to you, I avoided pretty much everything promotional about this, and I have seen the trailer now after watching the movie just to see what it was all about, and it seems like Marvel, they've done this in the past, notably with Thor Ragnarok, where they in the trailer they had the scene of him landing on the bridge covered in lightning after being awakened, but they had both of his eyes glowing. And in the movie, obviously by that point Hela has cut out his eye, but that would be a major spoiler to put in the trailer. There were a bunch of scenes in the Eternals trailer that were either just not in the final cut or were misleading as far as like VFX or just the way that they presented it was not exactly the way that it unfolded in the movie. And I kind of like that because I don't want that. I mean, that's part of the reason that I avoid trailers in the first place is because I don't want pertinent information being given away. And so I kind of like that they're doing a little bit of a bait and switch, and you never really know if the trailer is going to give you the full picture. It's there to just kind of draw you in. But there are obviously still scenes from the trailer that are in the movie and are spoilers. And so I felt justified, in not looking at it prior to seeing the movie. But I do appreciate what Marvel's going for, especially with unknown characters like the Eternals, where they potentially give you one direction in the trailer and change it out on you in the real movie, so you don't quite know what to expect. I do appreciate that they have done that, especially with the blockbuster nature of all their films. Everything's going to get spoiled as soon as it comes out, basically, which is the reason that I go to see these on opening night, so I don't have to wait any longer than I have to for all the stuff I want to see. But yeah, it's just interesting to me how that's the path that they've chosen to go, and I think it worked for Eternals. I don't think it worked quite as well as it could have, though, because this movie, similar to Guardians of the Galaxy, introduced a bunch of new characters, and this movie, even to a greater degree than Guardians because Guardians has a handful of unknowns, but this movie introduced 10 brand new Eternals, and then obviously they're villains and other side characters as well that we haven't seen yet. So this movie had to do what Guardians did, but on the next level as far as introducing new characters that we've never heard of. And I thought it struggled a little bit with that, but that's one of the issues that I had, and we can get into that as we go forward here. But overall, yeah, just would put it like firmly in the middle. One day we'll go through here, probably by the end of the year, actually, after Spider-Man comes out, we'll go through all of our MCU
Official
movies that
tier
have come out
list.
so far, and we'll do a tier list or a ranking or something, and we can see exactly where everything stands for each of us. But firmly middle of the road. There was a lot to like, and the stuff that I liked definitely stood out to me more the second time that I watched it. But I think the flaws that this movie has really stand out as well, and overall the movie suffers for a few things. But what did you think about all that?
Well, do you want to start off with stuff that we liked about it or stuff that we didn't like? Do we want to start positive or start negative? I think it might be helpful if we kind of categorize or have some structure to it so my mind doesn't just run all over the place.
Yeah, we can start off with the good stuff. What was your favorite, your few favorite things about this movie? I don't know if you only have a few, but if you want to list off all the stuff you enjoyed.
No, there was a lot of things that I liked. I liked the ambition that the movie had. I think that it tried to really put some tough situations or create some tough situations and moral complexity, which sometimes they've tried to do that, like with the Flag Smashers, and it hasn't worked out so successfully. However, it has worked really successfully in things like Thanos, where, he's not really morally complex because we all know he's the villain, but there's he has a reasoning behind why he's doing things, right?
Right, he's not evil just for the sake of being evil. He has nuance and,
exactly.
obviously flawed logic, but he has logic behind his plans. I get what you're saying.
Exactly, and that's something that they attempt to do in this movie, which I applaud them for, with the idea of, the Celeste... big spoilers, in case...
Oh, yeah, obviously. We're going to get into
spoilers.
Tons of details of this movie. Spoilers out the butt here.
Yeah. So, the idea of the Celestials being born, right, and destroying the whole planet that they're on, that they're born out of, but also Celestials being necessary to bring life to billions of galaxies, right? That is a really cool push and pull dilemma, right? And it's really interesting to try and tackle that. And I thought, that central idea was a good and interesting one. I think some of the characters were absolutely fantastic. I loved Gilgamesh. He was easily my favorite character. I, for the most part, liked Icarus up until the last 5 minutes of his character. I loved Thena. I thought that her challenge was really interesting as well. I loved Kit Harington's character, Dane. He was just fun when he was on screen. And I also liked Druig for the most part. I think he was the most I don't know if realistic is the right word, but he was the person that I identified with the most out of all of the Eternals. And I think, each of those characters was great. I thought Kinko was hilarious. I loved his valet. Everything with their interaction was fantastic.
Hold on. What was his name?
Kinko?
Kinko. Oh, he's... I think you're thinking of Kinko's, which is a company, and not the main the character. Kingo, with a G.
Kingo?
Yeah.
Whatever. Kingo.
Oh, sorry. I
love Kingo.
Get a gotcha there, but that made me laugh.
Whatever. Kingo. I haven't seen it written down, so I was just going off of memory.
Kingo and his valet, Karun.
Yeah, they were awesome, and I thought a lot of the combat was really cool. I loved how each of the Eternals had a unique set of powers, which apparently in the comics they all have the same power set for the most part. So I like that they diversified their power sets because, it's cool seeing multiple different powers going on in one combat. I thought the action was for the most part really good. I thought that some of the individual scenes also were really good. For instance, I liked the Bollywood scene. I thought that was hilarious. I liked the scene when they're kind of sitting down and when they go out and meet Gilgamesh and Thena and they're sitting down and having that kind of family dinner. I really liked that scene. A few the interpersonal moments I thought were really good. So, yeah, I think there was a lot that I really liked about this movie, which again, when people say it's the worst movie in the MCU, I'm like, I don't know what movie they saw, but that's their opinion, so they're allowed to have it. What were some of your favorite parts, or did you disagree on some of the things that I liked about it?
No, I was actually going to agree with pretty much everything that you said. Gilgamesh, Thena, Druig, I think were the strongest Eternals as far as character goes. Obviously, they may not physically be the strongest, but Druig, I completely agree with you. I mean, he was the only one that I felt I could actually relate to. He was like the most human out of any of them, despite obviously being, an Eternal. Druig and his ability to control minds, which was so casual and like didn't even realize how powerful that was until like after the second viewing. I was like, wait, he so effortlessly could like control the minds of everybody on the planet, as he stated in the movie, which is just a power level we have not seen before. Some of the other Eternals like have, fairly reasonable power levels, aside from being like thousands of year old beings. But I mean, this might be some crazy level of telepathy that we haven't seen yet. But yeah, the struggle that he went through in the middle of the movie, and the crisis that he deals with internally about humanity basically destroying itself due to the flaws of human nature, and he, with mind control abilities, able to stop it at a moment's notice and bring peace to the world and end all conflict basically. But knowing that doing that would remove, the humanity from humans is something that, you clearly see him struggle with, and I thought really brought a lot to his character. Despite coming off as, kind of a prick the first couple times you see him, he's, like arrogant and, isn't part of the team really, and has like a surly attitude. But he really comes into his own at the end, and I think he was probably my favorite character in the entire movie. Gilgamesh and Thena's relationship I thought was excellent as well. With, another one of the physically strongest Eternals in Gilgamesh, basically being a guardian over Athena as she deals with her mental issues, occasionally turning her against her friends, and he needs to basically like save her from herself. I thought that was excellent. Something that you didn't mention, and I know I blabbed on about this for the Dune review a couple weeks ago, but I mean the score for this movie was excellent. I love the music. Ramin Djawadi from Game of Thrones, who scored plenty of the most famous episodes from that show, did the score for this movie, and it was excellent all the way through. I love the music from start to finish. I think it really fit the kind of cosmic scale that we're entering into here with the Eternals and Celestials. And I also thought the visuals in this movie were excellent. I think it was a wise choice to have the Eternals, with their own unique powers, so that they could stand out. With there being 10 of them, it would get repetitive if they all were basically, carbon copies of each other. So for, storytelling purposes, I get why that was done. However, when we get to the stuff that we don't like, I'm going to bring this back up again because plot-wise, it doesn't really make sense that they would all have like one unique power. But I get why it was done, for the sake of being able to really tell them all apart and give them all individual characters instead of just being differently faced, carbon copies of each other, basically. I also have thought a lot about this after watching the movie because a lot of people, myself included, thought that this would probably be better served as like a Disney Plus series with so many characters, obviously, that we haven't met before. Essentially a dozen brand new characters that all contribute to the story in their own way. I felt like needed more time to flesh each of them out, and so we could care about more of their relationships and each of them individually more. I think one of the flaws of the movie was that there were a few characters, maybe more than a few, that didn't nearly get the development that they needed, and as such I didn't care about them as much as I felt I should by the end of the movie, or as much as the movie was like telling me that I should care about these characters. I thought a Disney Plus series would give the time to fully flesh these characters out and explore the plot a little bit more and give more background to some of the stuff that was unanswered. But I think the visual scale of this movie definitely lends itself to the big screen. Watching it the second time, I was trying to imagine, watching Arishem and the other Celestials on like, a phone screen or, even just a normal sized TV. And I was like, this really wouldn't do it justice. The scenes where Ajax or Cersei is brought before Arishem, and they're just like a tiny speck in front of his just colossal face, and you only see like a fraction of it because he's so big. Like that really was emphasized on the big screen, and I thought the scale was just excellently done. Even in the ending, and I'll just skip right to the end scene to spoil the very end of the movie. But when Arishem appears in the sky above Earth and parts the clouds, and his face is just looming over the planet, and then he yanks the three Eternals that are still on Earth out into space, and then vanishes into a black hole. That was like the coolest looking thing in the movie to me. And I'm sure we're gonna see, something like that is obviously gonna be noticed by other people in the universe. So I'm sure that event, the ending of this movie, is gonna be something that plays out into other stuff and kind of bleeds over into other projects that we see, and we see how other characters react to that insane thing happening. But yeah, I thought it looked excellent on the big screen and sounded great. But yeah, I mean, we only mentioned a couple characters that we liked, and like I said, there are 10 Eternals. And I think a lot of the problem that this movie has goes into the lack of development for a bunch of the characters. Particularly Icarus and Cersei, who are ostensibly like the two main characters of the movie and are supposed to be like in love for millennia, and I just did not buy into their relationship whatsoever. Like they had zero chemistry, and that totally made like their breakup and like when they get back together, not like necessarily as a couple, but when they reunite in the beginning of the movie, and then his betrayal at the end, like just did not hit me as hard as it should have, because I didn't buy the relationship that they were supposed to have had.
But Steve, there was a sex scene. How did you not buy into the whole? That was terrible. I can't believe that was in there.
I mean, people are freaking out about that online, then people are freaking out about people freaking out about it. So, I didn't think it was it's not a big deal for Marvel to have like a sex scene in their movie. I don't think it's, they are rated PG-13. It wasn't like Game of Thrones graphic, obviously. Despite it being Richard Madden. But like, I just didn't think it was necessary. Like it was so unemotional. Like it looked like just two very attractive wooden boards just like sliding on top of each other. I was like, this is so, I don't buy that they are madly in love. This scene does nothing to enhance their relationship. It could have been cut entirely, and like nothing would have changed in the story.
Yeah, it's like they said, okay, we have to make this romance work, but we only have X amount of time because there's so many characters and so many things we have to get to. What's the fastest way to show that these people are in love? And then some 10th grader was like, oh, make them bang, and then they did it. And like
brilliant.
That was supposed to cover up that was supposed to cover up like millennia of relationship.
Yeah.
And they figured throwing that in would like cover for all that, and it didn't. I mean, he walks up behind her like romantically. He has like a stone face. He has no emotion. She has no emotion. They hold hands, and then like I did not buy into that at all.
Yeah, completely agree. It was totally unnecessary. Did not enhance their relationship at all, and could have been cut. But also the people that are like, oh my gosh, let me clutch my pearls, there was a sex scene in a Marvel movie. I'm like, okay, also you're overreacting. It was barely anything. Like, come on.
I agree.
But yeah, their relationship wasn't the only one that I found to be like not fully fleshed out to the degree that it should have been. The other big one to me was Phastos, kind of the technological Eternal, who just can create apparently whatever he wants out of thin air, and his magic little rings. There was I'll just we'll go right into it here. The Hiroshima scene. Like over the course of the movie, we see that Phastos is like creating technology that will aid humans in their journey from basically like barbarians and like people just living off the land like thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, to like civilized society basically. And he tries to give like ancient Mesopotamians a steam engine, which I'm like, dude, like what in the world was the plan? Like that was so stupid to me. I was like, how would that even, like, you would blow their minds to a degree that they would probably explode on the spot if you gave them a steam engine. Like that was so silly to me. And then he's like, okay, I guess I'll give them a plow. And I'm like, yes, that would make more sense. They just need to like know how to make crops safely. They don't need to travel across the world on steam engines here. Like, dude, come on. But we have a scene with him like in the aftermath of Hiroshima, like basically claiming responsibility that his technology, and it I didn't interpret it as he directly gave like Oppenheimer the A-bomb blueprints, but basically that his contributions to human technology evolving led to, the nuclear bomb. And I feel like that could have been a really poignant moment, but he's like weeping about how he's given up on humanity and that the people on Earth aren't worth saving. And the very next scene, he's got like a family and he's like seems happy and like is unwilling to like join the team to get back together because he like has faith in the people that he's surrounded with now. Which, okay, if you want to have him have a change of heart regarding humanity, that's fine. But that's only like it's a 60-year difference. Right, it's off screen, and it's a 60-year difference for a being that's thousands and thousands of years old. Like, that is not enough time for him to have a complete change of heart. Like, I would have preferred if they just cut that scene and then have him just say, oh, I can't get back into the action, guys. Like, my family needs me. Like, I have to stay here for them. Like, that would have been a completely believable motivation for not rejoining the team. But then, of course, he joins the team anyways, and it's like, what was even the point of that? Like, I didn't understand his motivations from the start.
Yeah, I think that speaks to my biggest issue with the movie was the fact that when I walked out, it felt like the movie was 40 minutes too long. And as I think about it, it seems like the movie was 40 minutes too short. And it was both of those things simultaneously. It wasn't quite exciting enough to merit its full 2 hours and 50-minute runtime. So in that sense, it was too long. I mean, it's the second longest behind Endgame, right? And there was just really not enough that happened plot-wise for this to merit that long. At the same time, this should have been twice as long. Like, with the amount of character arcs, storylines, things that they tried to do, character development, so many things happened either really abruptly or off-screen. Like the Fastos thing. Like, they're going to try and find him, right? They're getting the gang back together. And they literally say he gave up on humans a long time ago when they're going to see him. And then it cuts back to the Hiroshima. And his whole character arc in that scene doesn't make any sense because he's like, the technology that I gave them led to this. Right? So he's like, I helped contribute to this. And the very next thing he says is like, they're not worth saving. Then shifting the blame back onto them. And then, like, the very next scene, he's, like, staunchly in love with a family and, like, refuses to leave them and has to get talked into it. And it's like, what on earth happened here? Like, it seems like it'd be a really interesting, like if the central conflict of the movie was, do we save humanity and the humans at the cost of all these other galaxies, right? With the Celestial being born. Like, if that's the central conflict of the movie, then having some sort of a plot line where the Eternals, through spending time on Earth, learn to love and appreciate humanity, like, that seems really great. And that's exactly his character arc, but it literally happens in 2 scenes, all off screen, in like 2 minutes in the movie. And it's like, whoa, wait, what the heck happened? And the same exact thing happens later with Ajax when it's finally revealed, which, first of all, terrible idea to kill supposedly the main character before we even meet them in the present day. Like, I did not care a single bit when she was dead, and we were supposed to because we just literally hadn't seen her on screen at all. Let us spend some time and get to know somebody, and then, a death will have an emotional weight. regardless, besides that, she has the exact same thing in a flashback later on talking with Icarus. She has spent thousands of years on the planet ready to go through with this plan to birth the Celestial and kill all the humans. And she's the one that's been aware on every planet ahead, like before this as well, and kept her memory of what they do. And she's done this on planet after planet after planet after planet for millions of years, we can imagine. In the last week before the Celestial is decided, or is supposed to come out, literally the last 4 days before or something.
Oh, she said 7 days. Yeah, it's literally a week.
7 days. She has a change of heart after all that time, when it's essentially too late to do anything, and it all happens off screen. She just says, "Oh, now they brought back half of the universe." It's yeah, that's amazing, but that happened way before 7. It all happens off screen. It's not believable, and it's just these are the things that would have been so interesting to see, instead of all of the other random stuff that happens in the movie, and it all happens off screen, and it's just
yeah,
then they don't make any sense.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I mean, the only character that we see go down that path that you're talking about as far as falling in love with, humanity
Mm-hmm.
and Earth is Cersei. I mean, we see that a little
Mm-hmm.
bit as she, is living amongst them and enjoys it. And, Icarus says in the beginning, he's like, oh, if I want to spend, more time with you, I got to get to, I got to learn
Mm-hmm.
to get to know these people better, because that's all you do is hang out with them. So I got that from Cersei, but yeah, the other characters, we see Ajax questioning maybe Arisham's design way back in the Babylon scene, which again, talk about visuals. The Babylon looked amazing with the blue gates and everything. That was one of the most gorgeous shots of the entire film.
Absolutely, yeah.
But we basically just only see Arisham tell her to shut up and follow his orders. But we don't know why she's like, there's something special about this planet. I'm like, no, there's not. What would you know at that point in 500 AD? What would you know about Babylon? Sorry. let me go back.
Humanity.
At 5, yeah, and in Babylonian times, what would you know is special about the Earth? What would have given that away? And maybe we'll get to see the answer to that in the future. But I did not understand why all the other Eternals bought into Cersei's idea and planned to save the Earth, when they also have gone along with Ajax and her, plans to allow the emergence to happen countless times before. Now, they obviously didn't have memories of that, as we learn, but it seemed to me like they all joined on Cersei's side because they loved the Earth and they wanted to save it. But we didn't really see that from any of them other than Cersei. And I get that Ajax had more of a point at the end, especially, depending on when this movie takes place. It based on the way everybody was dressed, it seems to be fall-ish. People were in upstate, or they were in London. I don't know why I said upstate New York. I'm just thinking Avengers facility. But yeah, Cersei and Dane are in London, and they're dressed for what appears to be fall or wintry weather. So you could probably assume this happens the fall after Endgame, but without an exact time, it's hard to tell when her change of heart took place. But she does mention that the people of Earth brought back half of all life in the universe by undoing Thanos' snap, which I absolutely could see that changing her mind on its own. But it seemed to me like she had thoughts before that. It just, again, there wasn't enough time to flesh out all the characters and their motivations, which, I think we'll both agree was a pretty big flaw that this movie had. Especially when, the characters were supposed to be the whole movie. 2/3 of the movie is spent gathering the team together for the final fight, essentially. And, we're supposed to care about all these characters. And even with all that chunk of time spent gathering everybody, there's just so many of them that they don't get the deserved time on their own. And I just wanted to see more from specific characters.
Yeah, I think a couple of them worked out really well. Like we had both said, we both liked Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh doesn't have a crazy big character arc. He's just a really good guy, willing to basically give up his life, right? Because he just stays out in the middle of nowhere with Thena. He doesn't literally die. I mean, at the end, he literally dies for her. But
R.I.P.
even before that, he's like super sacrificial, basically gives up his chance at a normal life so that she can keep her memories, right? But he doesn't have like a huge character arc, but he's just enjoyable, good, solid character, even though he doesn't like change a whole lot. The same with Makari. Is it that's how you pronounce it, Makari?
Yes, the speedster. She was. Oh, I forgot to say this in the stuff I liked. Her fight with Icarus at the end was amazing. Like that is how a Superman versus Flash fight should be done. Like they didn't show her in that bullet time slow motion once the entire movie. They just showed her at top speed every time. Like she ran around the planet looking for the emergence in like 2 seconds. Like that is what I want to see from a speedster. Like just showing how
just
ridiculously
more.
overpowered super speed is at like a superhuman level. Like was basically untouchable even by Icarus, who's apparently the strongest of them all. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But yes, Makari.
Well, I was gonna say it makes Quicksilver look even worse that he couldn't even dodge a couple bullets. So
well, he's clearly just not as fast as her. So.
Yeah, but like she was super enjoyable. Like she was fun and, you know, had personality to her and like didn't have this huge character arc or anything, but she was enjoyable. Like those two like were side characters and that's what they were. You know, they didn't try to get too complicated with it or anything. And those two I think worked a lot better than characters like Sprite or Fastos or the ones that they tried to have, or Ajax, that they tried to have this massive movie-long character arc condensed into like 2 minutes each. It's like each of the individual struggles that they had are like really fascinating things, and they all happened in like 1 minute and didn't make sense why they did. You know, like with Sprite, the whole idea of being trapped as a child for eternity, right? And she acts like a child the whole time. It's not like she's just visually a child, right? She's clearly very immature. That's a really interesting thing to dive into, like why was she made this way? And like she asks it, it never answers it, and then it's just left. And this was my other major criticism of the movie. The first one being the character arcs being way too condensed and skipped. The second thing being the big twist is that, and I think this is what you were referring to earlier, the big twist is that the Eternals are not from Olympia. They were designed and made for their purpose. If they were designed and made for this purpose, why on earth would they make one of them a child? Why on earth would they give them, half of them, abilities that are totally useless? They give Druig the ability to mind control people and then like basically straight up tell him not to use it. They give Cersei the ability to change matter, which by the end is awesome, but for the first half of the movie is nothing really helpful. Like why would they make one of them objectively way stronger than the rest? Why not just give them all Icarus's powers if he's visibly and agreed upon the strongest? Like if the Celestials are doing this, why on earth would they make one of them mute and deaf? Like if they're designed to be like warriors and designed to do this purpose that is critical for the lives of billions of galaxies, it makes literally no sense at all that some of them would have totally useless combat abilities and one of them would be a straight up child and one of them would have a massive, you know, communicative handicap. Like, what? Like like I said, I liked that they all had different powers. In the combat, it looked really cool and it was awesome for distinguishing them apart from each other and stuff like that. But really, only like 4 of them were helpful, like in the fights, which is like, why?
Yeah, and talking about their purpose, I mean, this just goes to show how bad, you know, the Celestials' plan was and how forgettable the Deviants were. I don't even think we've said the word Deviant up until this point in the dang, like, pod. Like, they were so forgettable. The Eternals' purpose, apparently, is to just destroy Deviants, which their purpose was to kill all the apex predators on a planet so that life could flourish and then the celestial seed in the planet could harvest like the life once, you know, it reached a certain population and then break out of the planet. Like that is such a
just send the
terrible
Eternals
plan.
to kill the apex predators.
Right. So yeah, Arishem explains to Cersei that he created the Deviants for that purpose, but he lost control of them somehow. Who knows how? Like he can just yank the Eternals off a planet at the end, but he can't do the same for Deviants? Okay. Then he creates the Eternals to go after the Deviants, which I don't know how you think that doing the same thing again would result in anything different. Like the Eternals rebel against him at the end of this. I don't like the same exact thing happened. Dude, you moron. Uh, fool me once. But like it's so silly. Like why? Yeah, if you have this world forge and you can create an Eternal like Icarus, who's basically Superman, and you can also create like Ajax who can heal everybody. Why not just put them all together and give all of them all the powers? Like it doesn't make sense. It stood out to me after the first fight that they have in the opening of the movie, where 4 or 5 of them are handling business, and then once the deviant's gone, like the other 4 or 5 ascend from the ship, or excuse me, descend from the ship, and they just do their classic like album cover pose with like 10 of them in a row, and I'm like, you didn't do anything. Why are you coming down just to pose after everybody else already handled business? Like it makes no sense that there would be like essentially half the team is non-combatant. So that was silly. Like the deviants, again, like we didn't even mention them up until this point.
Totally
were completely forgettable. Yeah. The leader who killed and absorbed 2 members of the team, and became like sentient and spoke and was aware that the Eternals had slaughtered endless of his kind across many different worlds, just died to Thena off by herself without any of us, without any of the other Eternals like reacting to the last deviants dying. Like completely forgettable, a waste of a performance by Bill Skarsgård, who's a fantastic actor, and like I could not believe that was just how they went out. Like it's another essentially faceless, gooey looking alien race that's just monsters for our heroes to beat up. And I thought that could have been really interesting, especially because they're both created by the Celestials, as we find out. Like, and Druig even says, at one point in the movie, he searches like the deviant has a mind of its own now, it's dangerous, and that makes it even scarier than it was before. And he's like, no, that makes it us. And they're like recognizing that there are similarities between them, and then that's never explored. And I'm like, why even bring that up if you're just gonna have the main deviant like all that happened for no reason? That made no sense to me.
Yep.
So yeah, there was plenty to like, and I don't want to trash on the movie, so we don't have to go too much more about the stuff that we dislike, because at this point we've given our thoughts on the movie as a whole, and I'd probably give it like on the Marvel scale like a 6.5 maybe. Out of 10 is like probably not the best way to rate it. We'll have to revisit this when we go to our tier list and our ranking stuff. But this movie does have a lot of implications moving forward. I think the biggest one for me is Galactus. Arishem appearing in the sky over, the Earth, and just looming over the planet with his head, just those 6 eyes just staring into the soul of the Earth was crazy. And I think that was kind of the first test for Galactus, which I really hope that we see in the future. And I think
we will,
given
eventually.
What we saw in this movie, he's coming. And I'm
certainly
really
will
eventually.
That.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how far down the line, and hopefully he's not a big cloud this time.
Oh my gosh, I'll be so furious if he's a big cloud. Fantastic Four movies, you are absolute garbage. I cannot wait for Marvel to do it right. But aside from Galactus potentially being in future installments, and I don't even know if we can say potentially. I think it's pretty obvious that they're going for that in the future. Yeah. The end credit scenes of this movie, Justin. There were 2. So if you are planning to go see this and you made it all the way through this and got the entire movie spoiled and were wondering about end credit scenes, there are 2. One mid-credit and one end credit. And I wanted to know your thoughts on those because they were both pretty crazy.
Well, the first one, when you said that the visuals looked really good in this movie, that is 100% true until the first end credit. When that little dwarf imp, I don't remember what his name is. When he comes out,
Pip the Troll.
The CGI was terrible.
Oh, he looked straight out of the Polar Express.
Regardless.
Yeah, that was bad.
Regardless, it was funny. We get to meet Eros, who is apparently Thanos' brother.
Yeah, what?
Which, this is kind of where I think in the comics, they're actual brothers because they're both like deviants, where Thanos has like the deviant gene. But in the MCU, Thanos is just straight up not. And so I don't know how they're going to tie that in, this way. But we see it's Harry Styles. I see his face. I'm like, now I'm never going to be able to see this guy on the screen without thinking about Harry Styles. So
Yep.
I don't love that casting. A lot of people in the theater were very excited. We're like, oh, it's Harry Styles. Ooh.
Oh my God, it's Harry Styles.
I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
He's acted before. He's a fine actor.
Yeah,
like,
no,
wrong with that.
He's a completely fine actor. It's not like a stunt
Yeah.
casting or anything like that. So Marvel always nails their casting, even for this movie, which had a lot of big name actors and actresses in it, which they don't typically do. Like this was a star-studded cast, like Richard Madden, Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek. I mean, it easily could have been a situation where the actors like outshone their characters, but I think Harry will be fine. Patton Oswalt as Pip the Troll was a good voice, and I'm sure he will look better in the future because he did look.
I hope so.
He looked like the train hobo from Polar Express. Like he looked terrible.
That was almost certainly a COVID restraint.
Yeah.
On him. I don't blame that on the situation at all, or I blame it on the situation, not the studio.
Correct.
But yeah, so they show up with Makari and Druig and the guys on that ship,
and Thena
to basically say. And Thena, yeah, and they basically say, we're going to go find the other Eternals, because Eris is an Eternal as well, which makes sense. They would be on other planets, given their purpose, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly where that's leading. Clearly there's going to be a sequel to Eternals, so, probably there. But the second one was way more interesting to me,
I agree.
where we see Dane, which, first of all, everyone's got to be a hero. You can't just have a regular human in the MCU anymore.
Of course not.
So, of course, we see that Dane somehow has this sword that is like
the ebony blade,
whispering, kind of the ebony blade. Do you want to do a brief 1 minute explanation of that?
Yeah, he has a box that is like whispering to him, and he opens it up, and it's got some Latin inside it, and it says "Death is my reward" in Latin, and the blade has like this weird effect on it, which this was crazy because the effects on the blade looked amazing to me, which coming right after the Pip the Troll looking like a PS2 cutscene. I was like, what the heck? But, he's about to touch the blade, and we hear a voice from behind him say, "Are you sure about that, Mr. Whitman?" And my theater was like, what the heck? Who is that? Because we don't see his voice. We don't see the person behind the voice. And I was curious about this as to the first time I viewed it. And apparently the director of this movie, Chloe Zhao, has confirmed that it was Mahershala Ali, a.k.a. the next Blade, that said those words to Dane Whitman. So we get our first taste of Blade coming in the MCU, which is going to be awesome. I can't wait for that. That was like my favorite part of the movie, knowing who that was after the fact. It was like, oh man, Blade's coming.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
I know, that was exciting. My first thought was maybe it's Nick Fury, but I was immediately like, no, that definitely does not sound like him.
Yeah, I knew it didn't sound like anybody that we had seen a lot of times before. Somebody I think in my theater was like, was that Doctor Strange? And I was like, dude, come on. No shot that was Doctor Strange. You absolute fool.
Facepalm.
Yeah. So Marvel did just, set up, they recently bumped a bunch of movies out a slot, including some untitled projects in the future, which we know is like Fantastic Four and Blade, considering they've announced those in the past. So Blade is on the horizon in the next 2 or 3 years. By 23 or 24, I'm sure it will be out. But yeah, huge implications at the end of this movie. And I'm sure there will be an Eternals 2. And if not, obviously the repercussions of this will be felt throughout the MCU, as we now have like half a Celestial sticking out of the Indian Ocean. So kind of hard to miss that.
No one will notice that. Doctor Strange is probably going crazy. Like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah,
but
Doctor Strange has got his
own
hands
problems
full
to deal with.
Yeah, we'll see in about 5 or 6 weeks what Doctor Strange has got his hands full with, as No Way Home is looming on the horizon, just like Erisham was looming on the horizon in this movie. But yeah, overall, this movie had a lot going for it. I think it unfortunately had a lot going against it too. But overall, again, I found it completely middle of the pack. It's definitely worth watching because it's going to have huge implications going forward. And I hope this kind of turns into like an Age of Ultron situation where it might not get the best reviews upon its initial release, but it ages very well with what it sets up and as people view it over time. So that's my anticipation for this movie. I hope to go see it and again and like it more in the future. But overall, like I said, probably middle of the pack for me.
Yeah, my final thoughts are very similar. I'd give it probably a 6 out of 10. 6 being essentially around the same watermark as Iron Man 3 and Ant-Man 2. You know, perfectly serviceable, not the worst ones, not anywhere near the top 10.
Oh man,
You just gave
based
me a
on
face.
well,
So
based on that, I'm very interested to see your overall list because I think ours might be very different.
those are
But,
probably way down the bottom for you. But
well,
we'll get into that
no
later.
spoilers. I can't tell you. Well, that's a future episode. Can't be giving out the good content already.
I
But
said probably.
yeah, we'll definitely have to revisit that in the future and list everything out.
Yeah.
But yeah, middle of the pack for both of us.
Yeah, I think just, again, a lot of really good things that I think if it had been either a series or 2 movies with time to flesh out each of these things, or if they had decided just to not be quite as ambitious and drop a few of the plot lines and character arcs, if they just cut out 5 of the Eternals, I think this is, you know, a solid 7.5, 8. I think it's much closer to the top 10 if they just didn't overreach quite as much as they ended up doing. Although I do appreciate the ambition, and I think, like you said, this is one that we'll look back on as having set up some of the most major parts of Phase 4 and beyond. So I think it definitely has its place in the MCU canon, and it'll be great to rewatch it again when I do my next watch through, but you know, not enough to pay and go see it again. But if you haven't seen it, go and see it. We got to keep supporting theaters, because I don't want to have to live in a world where we can only watch this stuff on our small TVs. So keep theaters open. Go and see it if you haven't. And sorry that you now know everything that happens, but not sorry because that's on you.
Yeah, if you sat through this entire spoiler review and now want to go see it, you know, I guess you're going to know what happens. So have fun. But yeah.
If you haven't had a chance, go ahead and check our poll and our question under the last episode, the Dune episode. Also, give us your thoughts on the poll down below, just on this one if you're on Spotify. If you're not on Spotify, you can't respond. But, you know, Spotify is free if you want, so go ahead and do that. And, yeah, we'll be back with Hawkeye and the Wheel of Time coming up here soon. And we also have potentially some theme music coming in next time, so we'll see.
Ooh.
And we're still trying to figure out how to get that to
tunage.
Work into the intro.
Oh baby,
we're about to spice this up. We're about to get to a whole nother level of professional.
Man. Yeah, so, episode 20 after this one has got to be you know, a new watermark for us. We might have to get some intro tunes and turn a new leaf here.
20 episodes, dude. That's going to be a good one. So come back in next time. We're going to talk about Hawkeye and the Wheel of Time. And, yeah, have a great weekend, whenever this comes out.
Who are you talking
Stay
to,
good.
dude? They're not going to talk back
I'm talking
to
to everybody.
You're talking to me.
They're not. That's okay. Steve?
No, that's all right.
Have a great week. Have a great weekend.
Justin, you have a great week, too.
Enjoy life.
Peace.
Deuces.